This episode of Reflections in Time is made possible in part by the University of Nebraska at Omaha's College of Business Administration.
More than 25 years ago, the late Professor Paul Borghi developed an interview series that he called Reflections in Time. It was intended to preserve some of the history of the University of Nebraska at Omaha by recording experiences of faculty and others who contributed to its development. With the aid of the UNO Alumni Association, I began this new series to carry on Paul's work. My name is Jack Newton. I'm retired now, but I'm still active as a professor emeritus. I have been on the faculty of UN Omaha since 1960 and served for 20 years as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I worked closely with Professor Borghi in the development of his original interview series, and I can think of no more fitting tribute to him than to continue this work. Well, it's a very warm day in summer of the year 2005, and we're here in the TV studios with my guest, Dr. Jack Hill, Professor Emeritus of the College of Business Administration. Jack, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
We've known each other for a long time, but you've been here longer than I have. You first started out in, what, 1955, yeah, 5 years before I arrived on the scene. So I guess you're the senior member of this group.
Perhaps I am by now.
Yeah. So you're currently Professor Emeritus. How long have you been retired?
Since 1989.
89.
But after 89, then I went to Romania for a while for the college. So
oh, we'll have to talk about
active.
that. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. Are you still doing things for the college now, or?
Well, I wrote the history for them, and I serve on the Beta Gamma Sigma initiation each year.
What's Beta Gamma Sigma?
That's the honorary for business administration.
Yes, I should have known that. Okay. And the history that you're talking about is available to the general public if they'd like to read it just by logging into the website for the College of Business Administration at UNO and looking up history of the college, and there it'll be.
That was the college's 50th anniversary. See, it began in 1952 as a college.
Yeah.
So then this was the 50th anniversary in 1992.
Oh, so it's not quite up to date.
No.
Okay, maybe you'll update it one of these days. You were first interviewed for this. This is not a new experience for you. You were interviewed by the master himself, Professor Borghi, and that was back in 1984. So that's a while back.
Yes.
A lot's happened since then. So that'll give us something to talk about anyhow. Usually we spend a good bit of time in this series learning about our guests' background, you know, so where you were born and where you went to school and things of that sort. But all of that's been covered exceptionally well in your earlier interview, so I'm not going to duplicate all of that stuff, interesting as though it might be to do so. But anyone who wants those details, incidentally, can get them by looking at the 1984 tape. And that tape, a little plug here now, that tape is available in the UNO library. You can look at it there, or it's also available in the library of the UNO Alumni Association. All of those are on the half-inch VHS tapes and are readily available to the general public. For the benefit of our current audience, though, and I think we ought to take them into consideration, for their benefit, let's review some of the highlights of your background. Now, if I did look at that earlier tape, and I've read a lot of what you've done. But if I remember correctly, you grew up in Colorado, and like me, you were a child of the Depression, and in the 1930s. Could you fill us in on where you went to college and where you went to graduate school, how you got interested in the field of business, and well, just whatever you'd like to throw in there?
I think I had always been interested in business. My dad, of course, owned his own business in Colorado. He ran a music store. Also was a major appliance salesman for Denver Dry Goods Company in Denver. But I went to college after the war at the University of Denver, got my baccalaureate degree.
This is the Second World War you're talking about when you say after the war.
Well, that's right.
And you spent a little time engaged in that too, didn't you?
Well, before the war, I had 1 year, and then went to service, came back after 3 years in the Navy, then finished up a baccalaureate at Denver University in business, and stayed for the master's degree. And then during the master's oral examination, my senior professor said, "Jack, have you ever thought about college teaching?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, think about it." So he made a telephone call to a friend of his in Florida. Next thing you know, my wife and I were heading for Florida State University, which when we got down there, it was still Florida State College for Women. So we walked into the classroom. In those days, maybe it'd be 60 students there. 57 were women and 3 guys who thought they'd gone to heaven.
Well, you know, that gives us a little bit of that background. Then we'll talk some more about it later as we continue along here. If there's anything you want to add, but I think that I remember first meeting you back when I first came here at a party at the house of Bill Janes. Remember Bill? He was chairman of the psychology department at the time, and Bill and I were close friends in graduate school. We spent a couple years in the Army together, and he recruited me to come out here to Omaha. But he used to have these great parties where he'd invite people from all of the different colleges. So I got to, in fact, I got to meet another Hill that way. I got to meet Pete Hill in the art department the same way.
Don't forget Dwayne Hill.
And and Dwayne Hill in history. He was history, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So there were a lot of Hills back then. So,
yes.
Did you know Bill Janes very well at that time?
Fairly well. Of course, in those days, we only had the one building for the entire university.
Yeah.
And
so
of course,
people knew each other better.
You did not have the jealousies between departments. We'd go out to dinner together, had parties together, all the time.
Yeah, the faculty was much smaller back then, and it was a closer-knit community, I think.
When I came, the college only had 12 faculty in it.
Yeah.
And 2 had PhDs. I was not one of them.
And there can't have been many more than 100 people on the total faculty, full-time people.
The year I came, 1955, there were almost more new faculty than there were existing faculty. And we were all introduced in a classroom one time, and Josephine Bale, Dr. Bale's wife, said, "Let me see if I got this right." She went around the room and called every name
person
right.
by name.
Well, she was phenomenal in knowing names.
Yeah, well, Dr. Bale himself used to be that way, too. He
used to be Dr. Bale when you got hired and if you got fired. So I met her twice. I only saw him once.
Well, I was, I guess, in a way luckier because I got to know him fairly well, and after he retired, got to see him. Meet him in a grocery store, you know. That was kind of nice. Well, you know, I was, when we were thinking about doing this interview, I was in a bit of a quandary, I have to admit, because I have a standard format for these interviews that I got from Paul Borghi, who developed it originally, and the whole idea was this is kind of oral history, and we want to follow a similar format for everybody so that people who are trying to learn something about the history of the university and its various departments can depend on getting certain information from each interview. But Paul already did that with you, and as I say, the master interviewer, he didn't miss anything. So I can't very well follow that same format. I could just ask you, well, Jack, what's happened since 1984? But that probably wouldn't be too great either, because there are probably some things you want to talk about that happened before 1984. And besides, that as I've found out in recent years, as you get older, you start forgetting things that happened back that far. So I thought it might be more interesting to take a chronological approach, but not by the numbers. In other words, not go by years, because I tend to forget numbers too. But I remember names better. And so what I'd like to do, and what we'll do in this interview, is to talk about people. I'd like to talk about people mainly probably from the college administration or College of Business Administration, but also as we go along, presidents and other people like that who you may have come in contact with for one reason or another. And that way, as we go along, you can fill in details about what happened then, and any stories that you might have, or anything of that sort that might illustrate what went on during that period. So we'll, and also we'll talk, we can talk about the curricular matters and how things changed in development of degree programs and the faculty involved, and I think that'll work out pretty well. So let's start out with a person who you talked about a lot in your first interview, and he was so important, though, that important to your college, that we'd be really remiss if we didn't mention him again, and that was the man who was dean when I first came on the scene, and that was, of course, John Lucas. He, as I said in your first interview, you discussed him extensively, but and you told about what he did, but you didn't talk too much about what he was like as a person. So could you fill me in a little bit on that? What did you we know about his accomplishment, but what was he? How did he run the college? What was he like personally?
He was a gentleman. During our first year, George Harris and I put together what called kind of a manifesto, what we thought the college should be like. We gave that to Dean Lucas. And the dean called us in the office and he said, "Well, it sure sounds good to me, except that I don't know whether you're going to stay here or not. And all the things you want to do require you guys to put in place." So then he said, "Let's wait about a year and see how this thing works." That's how you handle people. Just didn't turn you down. Let's wait. Let it gel.
Now you mentioned George Harris. He was a professor.
He was a professor of finance. He had the PhD. The rest of us did not have. We couldn't afford to hire PhDs those days. We had to grow our own.
Right.
So I was still going back to the University of Texas to get my degree. Others were working on their degrees also. But a year later, we got most of our changes of the curriculum in. Moving from, more to a professional college rather than from a secretarial science. In those days, students had to know how to typewrite. We still taught some secretarial science. Years later, those were moved over to college education, and the faculty also. Then we kept ours more in business administration, working towards accreditation. The one thing the dean really wanted was accreditation. And that required faculty with their terminal degrees. So of course, I did get mine finished. Dr. Bull, chairman of marketing, got his degree. Joyce Montier got her degree in communication. And down the line, we all got our degrees, and eventually we got the college accredited by the American College Association of Collegiate Schools of Business.
Yes, we often refer to it as the AACSB, right?
Well, they changed their name a little bit, but in those days that was it. And we bring in faculty from other schools to look at us, tell us, what do you have to do to get this accreditation through? And Dean knew these people on a first-name basis. He'd bring them in, we go through the whole curriculum, make our changes, and so when we finally applied for it, we got it on the first try. But he was a gentleman.
When I got to be a dean, this was after Dean Lucas had retired, but he was still around occasionally, and his fellow deans and other people that knew him well called him Jack Lucas. Did any of the faculty have that kind of familiarity with him, or?
Dean Lucas. Except that one faculty always called him Mr. Lucas.
Because he didn't have a
She was
bachelor.
his secretary. She was a student here. Later became a faculty member, but always he was Mr. Lucas to her, but the rest of us, Dean Lucas. No other name but Dean Lucas.
You have an interesting story, I think, as to why he didn't get his doctoral degree. He was, like me, a student at Ohio State University,
Yes.
but he was in their College of Commerce there, which is what they called the business college back then. And I was, of course, in the psychology department. But why didn't he finish his doctoral degree?
He got so busy at this university doing some things with student affairs and others that he finally just kept staying. He could have finished his degree, but he just was too busy out here on the campus. He took over the deanship, and I think it always kind of bothered him he didn't get that degree. But the rest, we never thought about that.
So that was, in a way, a real personal sacrifice for him.
Yes, it was.
For the good of the university.
He had other jobs. He was dean of students, or something like dean of students.
Yeah.
There was a student strike or something years ago. He had to get that settled down. By the time he got all the things in place, too late to go back to school. He stayed out here.
Yep. You know, you mentioned accreditation just a moment ago, and I was going to bring that up later, but since you mentioned it, let's talk a little bit about it now. As you pointed out, that was very important to the college.
Yes.
And so could you tell me a little bit about what the influence of that need for accreditation led to? What sorts of things changed because of it?
Well, the curriculum is the big thing that has to change.
Mm-hmm.
And also the faculty composition. We had to have far more faculty with the so-called terminal degrees, which a PhD in most fields. And in those days, even the CPA did not count as terminal degree.
Mm-hmm.
It does today. In those days, a certified public accountant did not count. And even the Doctor of Education did not count. Not for a terminal degree.
Mm-hmm.
It would in some other college, but not business college. So that we had to be sure we had all those things in order. Then the curriculum had to have certain courses in it. And certain hours had to be met. Certain academic standards by the students had to be met. The library had to have certain standards in it. And of course, to get those faculty meant you had to hire faculty, which meant getting more money.
Right.
And that didn't always set well some of the other faculty in the university, because our college was being singled out for some special treatment, which meant more money to hire the faculty. And so that didn't always set well with everybody, but that's how it had to be to get that college accreditation through.
Now, I remember business college deans saying to me that because of the accreditation requirements, that this is when I was Dean of Arts and Sciences, they said, well, you know, the reason we have so many arts and science courses required is that we need to have them for accreditation. They want our students to have a good general education background as well as a business background.
That's right.
And I always thought that was one of the better things that organization did.
No, you didn't have too many free choices in those days. You had to take so much English, so many of the social sciences, history, political science, all those other courses, mathematics, for our college to get its accreditation. Yes, very important. It still is.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does that continue to be important?
Yes, absolutely.
The accreditation of the...
Yes.
And was UNO the first in this area to be accredited?
Out here?
It's business college?
Creighton.
Creighton was first, and then...
and of course, Lincoln had theirs.
Yes, of course.
They were grandfathered in.
Do all of the institutions in the, all of the colleges now in the area that teach business administration have that?
That's a very difficult thing to do. I don't have all the numbers, but our dean does. Lou Cole has the numbers. And there are very few colleges of business that are accredited compared to the total number of those colleges.
So if a student were looking at a college of business administration for a degree, they'd do well to ask the question, are you accredited by this
I think they should.
professional organization?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, I was, as I said, I was going to get to that later, but I think it's important to get it in someplace. One of the things, though, I remember from looking at your history, and I did have a question about, was that in those early days, I think going back to around 1958 or so, the college adopted a 2-year certificate program in business. But I haven't ever heard of that since. Did that just get dropped by the wayside?
It died a natural death.
Probably when you were looking for accreditation, that would have been frowned on, maybe.
Well, in those earlier days, some students could not go to college for 4 years.
Yeah.
So there were 2-year certificate programs,
Right.
associate degree programs in engineering. We had one in business. We had a combination business and engineering certificate program. But over time, those just got dropped by the wayside as you began to concentrate more on a four-year college.
Uh-huh. Well, if I remember correctly, and we don't have to discuss this, but it's just jogged my memory for a minute. There was a time back in the early 60s when we didn't have two-year colleges around like Metro Community College. The community college system had not yet been established. But the legislature in Lincoln wanted to have some sort of two-year programs. And we got, in some of our two-year programs, funds. Before we were a state university, got some funds from the legislature to support those students who were in two-year programs, anticipating that there would eventually be two-year colleges.
Yes. That was not a big part of our college, though. Very few students really stayed in those programs.
Yeah. But I always thought that was kind of interesting that we had, I think they called it junior college funds or something like that, that we got from the state even before we were a state part of the state system.
I think one of those was even in retailing with Herf Davison ran the retailing program. He had a two-year program there. These were certificate type programs.
Right. Okay, well, let's skip on a little bit here because I think there were some interesting things that happened that you've already talked about, and we might have occasion to even look at a few of your mementos. Dr. Bale retired in 1965, and he was replaced by Leland Trawick. Dr. Trawick he was an economist, wasn't he?
He was an economist, yes.
So he should have been pretty sympathetic to the College of Business, you'd think.
Well, I think we had that sympathy. We did not have a leader.
Yeah.
We needed more than just a president. We needed someone who could make this university go, because in those days it was the Municipal University of Omaha, not the University of Nebraska at Omaha. We were supported by a mill levy in Omaha, about, I think it was 2 mills, which wasn't very much, and all the property value for this campus. And we were running out of money. And Leland Trawick, President Trawick, went to the citizens, had an election, got turned down. That was a setback. And he tried it again and got turned down. In the meantime, of course, the school was going down the tube, so to speak.
Right. Now, in those days, it was a municipal university.
Yes.
And because of that, we were supported by property tax levies on real property, and or personal property, and that this mill levy you were talking about was an attempt to increase those property taxes.
He tried to increase it, and the citizens kept voting him down.
Right. If I remember, we'd wear little badges saying "Support UNO." Do you have one of those with you? Maybe we could get the camera to zoom in on it. And,
of course, this was not to support UNO.
Put it over there.
This was for the merger, which came on later.
Oh, really? Okay, that was not. Well, let's hold on to that for a minute then, because that'll.
No, this was different.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have anything from the mill levy that like that.
I have nothing in my.
Okay. Well. Don't remind me if you do have something, okay? Because then I won't get it wrong like I just did. What else do you remember about Dr. Trawick that you might not have mentioned before?
Well, at the time he was installed, it was more like a coronation, as some of us thought, with all the pomp and circumstance, which is great for a university to have. It was really a very colorful affair, but he did not come through as a president from our standpoint. I think the word would be to say he presided over a campus. He did not lead the campus. And after a while, once we got turned down twice on the mill levy, there was no place left to go.
So we didn't have any money to work with.
No money.
That's the hard part.
He refused to try to consider the merger. And so then, under pressure, he did offer a letter of resignation in 1968 to the Board of Regents. I read the letter yesterday in the get the right office at the library.
In the archives.
Archives office. It was a very nice letter, how much he appreciated the university and put some condition in the letter that they had to pay him so much of his unused salary for all this to go through. And the Regents adopted that. The next month, the legal counsel of the Regents said, you can't do that. So then the Regents said, okay, we terminate his contract. That's the whole litany of things of why he was ineffective.
So he tried to resign and couldn't, so they fired him.
He said, I won't resign unless you accept this.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't do that, so then they fired him. And he sued a few months later for his unused salary. It was for a 3-year contract. And they settled for less than what he wanted. Then some citizen tried to stop that, and they had to pay off his legal fees. But now Trawick was gone. Then they had to bring in someone else. At that time was Dr. Kirk Naylor.
Kirk Naylor.
And he'd been Dr. Baylor's assistant anyway.
Well, let's we'll spend some more time on that, but let's finish up with Trawick first. Were you there when he told the faculty that he was leaving at the Christmas party?
I did not go to the Christmas party.
Well, he had back in those days, starting with Dr. Bale, I guess, it was traditional for, before at the end, or it wasn't the end of the semester then, but it was before Christmas anyhow, before the Christmas holidays.
These were fabulous parties.
He used to have these fantastic, I remember the big bowls of shrimp, for example, which was more unusual then than it is now.
Well, Dr. Bale took over the Fontenelle Hotel one time.
Yeah.
Had great meals. And one time Dr. Bale was even the king of Exarban.
Right.
And we had a big dinner on the campus in the administration building, which is now Arts and Sciences Hall. And we went table to table on international cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
And Trawick, he followed through on that. Yes.
That's interesting. But anyhow, Dr. Trawick continued that tradition, had a big Christmas party, and then he, at the end of it, he had a microphone and he called the faculty together and said, I want to announce to you that I'm leaving. And it was a very kind of tearful occasion for him, too.
Yes.
He was very emotional about it. And he left and went to teach economics in the East someplace.
Yes, that's right.
Anyhow, it was, we didn't see him again, but can you remember anything good that he did?
Not in terms of committees, but yes, he was a nice man. We had good parties and all. Good rapport. He's a real nice individual.
Yeah.
He just did not know how to get this campus the kind of funding that needed to go forward.
Well, I remember we were just starting with computers back then, and one of my very close friends was the head of the of campus computing, Dr. Bill Walden.
Yes.
You remember Bill probably. Yes. And he negotiated with Trawick to buy a new computer and to bring us into the real world of computing, and ended up spending, well, he worked a good deal with the National Cash Register, which was the manufacturer of the computer we eventually bought, but it was a real upgrade, and it was mainly through Trawick's efforts that we were able to get that. Now, he probably didn't have the money that it took to buy it.
Maybe
but he
not.
Dug it out of someplace. And,
see, the computer I remember was the IBM 1620.
That was the earliest one, which was probably less powerful than what you have on your desktop.
But it's the one I started using business games on. I was one of the first faculty to have business games. Those are card-fed. You had to punch your own IBM card, feed them in. A man by the name of Red Byers ran the computer setting.
Yeah, well, he ran a tab shop where he did all of the
cards up on top of the machine.
That was all the registration and billing and that
all
kind
that
of stuff.
Right? But I ran a computer business game for my students in those days.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you mentioned President Naylor, and do you remember that he was interim president, and there was some speculation, I think, among the faculty that he had kind of, well, probably for personal gain or something, he had been partly responsible for Trawick being fired. And I'm sure, I doubt that is true, but there, you know how rumors go. And I remember that faculty meeting, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned Dr. Trickett, Stan Trickett, head of the history department a few minutes ago, and because he was involved heavily with the inauguration, or as you
Yes.
called it, the coronation. But he got up and spoke of that. Spoke at that faculty meeting, and
Quite a few faculty spoke. He was one. Paul Beck, also in the history department, spoke at that meeting.
yeah, yeah,
These you have to categorize as polemics.
yes,
Today's people back in Washington could learn how to deliver polemic from these people. And yet, by the end of about 8 months, the same group that was out to keep Naylor from being named president said he should be our president.
yeah. And
I
I think Dr. Trickett even apologized.
he did. He made the motion. Let's make him our permanent president. Of course, Naylor, he sacrificed himself for this campus,
Yes.
and that's where this came in to get the merger through. We all began
Okay.
wearing
Well,
these
let's
pins.
see. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
When you say the word merger, and this is the button that people wore to support the merger. I don't know whether they can zoom in on that, but I think they can. What does it say on it? Oh, don't move it.
for OU2.
Don't move it. Keep it there, or they won't be
Okay,
able
for
to focus
OU2.
on it.
Omaha University 2.
Right.
Not UNO yet, still Omaha University 2.
Right. And that was the because since it was owned by the city had to give it up in order to, and
But
then
took
the
a vote.
state legislature had to pass a law to
Enabling
make
legislation.
it part of the state university
And
system.
it says that Omaha had to vote to relinquish the university. I saw those in the minutes yesterday in the archives, all the motions and all that. And we gave up all our property to University of Nebraska, just University of Nebraska in those days.
And they did a few interesting things, like spending in those days there was a budget, and it all came from property taxes.
Yes.
And there was no special appropriation for capital construction or anything.
No.
So they had some money in the budget, and I think that's when Allwine Hall got built, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dr. Bale, he could squeeze a nickel till the buffaloes yelped on it, because he would come by the end of the year, say, I've saved this much money, and we can build this building with it. Or one time he came back and he said, all you faculty turn in your contracts. Huh? Turn in your contract. You got a new contract. And he said, some of you won't get a new contract. It'll be the same contract. But he had extra money, gave us more salary increase right in the middle of the year. He could do things like that as a municipal university.
Right.
But you couldn't do that as a state
But
university.
since he had this hunk of money that they'd been saving, they built a new building with it
Oh,
before
yeah.
the merger, so that it wouldn't be money going to the state; it would be a building going to the
That's
state.
right.
And that was Allwine Hall, which
Yes.
housed biology and chemistry for a good many years.
That's true.
Still houses biology.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, Dr. Naylor did a good job of holding the university together in those years.
He pushed for that merger to go through, but of course when the merger went through, then of course the word merger kind of a misnomer, because merger means one's a subordinate to a senior.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we were supposed to be the junior campus reporting to a senior campus. We didn't like that up here at all.
Right.
And time and again, they had a new president a new chancellor in Lincoln. We had a president,
Yes.
President Naylor. They had a chancellor, Varner. And after a couple of years, by looking at dictionaries, whatever, someone decided a chancellor was an assistant to a king, and therefore they reversed the roles. And our chancellor, president became a chancellor, and their chancellor became the president
Right.
of the university. That was back 1962 or so, right in there.
Well, we better move along here, because we haven't gotten into modern times yet, and we're still we're about halfway through. About that time, Dean Lucas retired, and you had a new dean in the College of Business.
I was chairman of the committee to bring in a new dean.
Search committee.
Search committee.
And that was when you hired Dr. Heather, right?
Dr. Heather. I'd known
George
him
Heather?
from Florida, worked with him at Florida State and Texas Tech, and for some reason or other, he was leaving Texas Tech, and we brought him up here to replace Dean Lucas.
Well, he wasn't the only person that came from Texas Tech. Didn't he bring a bunch of faculty with him from there? Or
No.
at least they hired a bunch of faculty.
That
from
came
Texas.
later.
I remember they used to be referred to in some circles as the Texas Mafia, who would There were a number of them.
I never heard that. We only Texas guy I
Well,
know.
that's because you were in the college. They probably was outside the college.
The one I know best, of course, is Bob Mathis. Of course, he's the author of the #1 textbook of human resource management throughout the world. He's now retired. So he's the one I know from Texas.
Well, I'm trying. Jim Conway was too. I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there were at least one other.
Might have been some others, but I don't recall them coming up as a result of George Heather.
You mentioned in your history that there was a bit of conflict there because Dean Heather wanted to impose more research requirements on the faculty. Is that, if I remember, I'm trying to remember the history you wrote now, and I think that was one of the things. There was controversy between faculty and the dean.
There was. I don't recall it being more research.
Okay.
I remember.
I remembered that wrong, but he was soon replaced by Dean Muse back in 1973, Bill Muse, who did have a strong research emphasis.
No, I think that George Heather was content to let faculty slide.
Yeah.
It's a bad thing to say. I think they were willing to slide, because I know I was part of the group afterwards with myself and George, I can't write, myself, Gene Newport, and Willis Rokes put together a letter which we sent then to President Naylor to help move Dean Heather out of the job, because he was standing in the way of research. We wanted this campus to go someplace.
Yeah, maybe I certainly got that wrong.
We wanted to go someplace.
Well, about that time in the early 70s, we hired a new chancellor on this, give him this correct title now.
Roskins.
And that was Dr. Roskins.
Yes.
Ron Roskins, who the Business College building is named after.
Right.
And his emphasis, if I remember correctly, and I just became dean shortly after he was hired, so I remember very well, there was an emphasis on increasing the stature of the university through scholarship and international programs and other things. And he hired Herb Garfinkel as his chief academic officer, vice chancellor for academic affairs and provost. And Dr. Garfinkel was a widely respected, nationally, even worldwide known political scientist with a specialty in American government. And he came from Michigan State and was very well respected by everyone, I think, at least in terms of his scholarship, but also very demanding, which caused him a few problems with some faculty members who didn't like those demands to be put on them.
Absolutely. That was part of our college, too.
And I'm sure that's why Bill Muse got hired.
Because some guys were willing to retire on the job.
Yes.
But we wanted this college to go someplace. And so Roskins was right, Muse was right. And of course, about that time, then the international thing began to hit. Because of the...
And Dr. Roskins, of course, was very much interested in international programs, and indeed, well, it was mostly fortuitous, but we began the Center for Afghanistan Studies at the same time.
It was very fortuitous. It worked out that way.
Right, yes.
I was there in '76, and it was a great thing at that time.
Right. We'll have to talk a little later about your experiences in Afghanistan and working with that program. Okay, so Bill Muse came on the scene in 1973, and can you discuss briefly his approach to administering the college? Something about, if I remember, he did away with departments.
He did away with departments, and I forget what he called it, something else, some other name besides department. But when he came in, his condition was all department chairmen resign. So he put your letter of resignation on his desk. He picked up some and sent others back. He sent mine back, I forget. He gave me a different job that was not in management, it was general business or something like that. But a couple of guys who didn't have their terminal degrees, he just accepted their resignations. So he was moving the college along. He also brought in a #2 man, Who was Larry Trussell?
Larry Trussell, who we've interviewed in this series.
That's
so
right, and he stayed on for a
told
good
us a
many
good
years.
bit about what happened in those days.
Very, very international in his approach.
Right. Did Dean Muse tell people that's what he was going to do when he was being interviewed for?
I was
the
not
job?
part of the interview, so I don't know.
Oh.
But that was a condition of taking the job.
Yeah.
That the chairman.
So the chairman didn't know about it beforehand, no?
I don't think. I think it was. I wrote probably a conditional. He did not want conditional resignations. He resigned.
Yeah.
And I decided which ones I want. He revamped the college.
Yeah, he did change it.
Yes,
and,
he did.
Made lots of changes. Well, he and I were both new deans together in 1973.
Yeah.
Maybe he preceded me by a year, but I got to know him fairly well for that reason, and we talked together a good bit. And then he went on to become, well, eventually president of the University of Akron in Ohio.
He went on down to
and then
Texas,
down to
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, right?
Now he was moving, so he would not stay too long in one place.
Right. And then about that time we changed chancellors too. A little later, when Dr. Roskins moved to Lincoln and became president of the university.
That's right.
And so he held both titles, chancellor first and then president. And then Dr. Weber came in as chancellor at UNO. Did that have any immediate effects on the College of Business, or when Weber came on board?
I'm not sure about immediate effects, but certainly he was good for the college. He was good for the university.
Oh yes, definitely.
We need his kind of leadership.
Yes.
That man can make it go.
Yeah, and he's been interviewed extensively in this series.
And
too.
I did interview him for the college history also.
Right. And you mentioned Larry Trussell, who was brought in by Dean Muse as assistant dean, and then later in the late 70s became Dean Muse's successor.
Yes.
What was your relationship with Larry?
I'd say very good. He was a very fine dean. He was very energetic. He pushed academics. He wanted that accreditation to go forward. Of course, we wanted to get the graduate program fully accredited, which we did. Also, he began pushing more and more for the international part of it. And Larry was very, very good at the international aspects of management and curriculum development.
Okay, we mentioned international stuff a minute ago, and we started talking about Afghanistan. What was, and I know you were involved in that program. What was your involvement?
I was teaching at Kabul University for the administration of that university.
Okay, we had at that time, and this was before the Russian invasion, we had an exchange agreement with Kabul University where some of our faculty went there and a few of their faculty came here. Is that what you were part of?
No,
or
I was different.
A different program.
So you had engineering went over there, and education went over there to train teachers. But I was sent over there separately to train faculty of the university, of administration of that university. So I went there once in January of '76, wrote a report of what we could do, and it was accepted. And then went back there in the summer to stay the summer and do this. And of course the politics at Kabul University had changed, and they had a new man. He looked at my report and said, "I don't like this." Huh? So he said, "Well, I want more people in it," which created a problem because we had made up all these books written in Farsi to hand out. They were beautiful green notebooks. And he said, "Well, duplicate it for everybody else." Well, you can't have different textbooks in the same classroom, because one group says, I'm being discriminated against. So we had to go out and develop new textbooks, reprint them all over there in Kabul, and get that class going. But I think it went real well.
Yeah, it must have been interesting.
It was, because I had one man named Karzai, not the president. He was my interpreter. And every day I'd go and say, "Okay, here's how I want to present this." He said, "Well, that okay?" He said, "No, that part is not good." I said, "What about, like, you can't have a committee developed by camels or something like that." I said, "No, that will not fit well in our religion." So he always kind of told me what I couldn't do. So when I got in the classroom, I could say things and he had to translate. And it went real well. Then one of your English professors, Bruce Baker and I, we'd every weekend take a car and a driver. We'd head off all through the hinterland of Afghanistan. So we had great times over there.
Bruce was over there on a Fulbright
yes.
scholarship, a Fulbright fellowship. Yeah.
So Bruce and I would team up about every weekend. He and his wife, my wife, take off through the countryside.
That must have been fun.
Oh, it was a marvelous
beautiful country.
And we had 2 servants in our house, manservant for my wife or myself. I was driven to work every day by a chauffeur.
But Bruce didn't have those advantages because Fulbright didn't.
Fulbright, they didn't. He was the bottom heap.
Right.
So I was treated like a king. And my next door neighbor was a Russian general who had armed guards around his house. I lived in a house with a big high wall too.
Well, we had a number of other international programs. Would you get involved in those too? I think the one in Romania was a big one.
We went to Romania right after they had the Ceausescu when he got shot. About that time, then Wally Bacon was setting up, a professor of political science, set us up on that, and I got involved.
Well, that was Iași.
Yeah.
In Iași. And it was Kusa, AI Kusa University.
Kusa University up in Iași, north of Bucharest. And that's a great school up there too. And we trade students back and forth between those 2 schools and faculty. And
back in 1991, 3 of us, Tom Gutierrez and myself and Larry Trussell, traveled all over Europe interviewing people at these different universities and considering kind of sister university relationships with them. We went to Charles University in Prague, in the Czech Republic. We went to Vienna. There was a business college there actually in Vienna that we visited. Went to Braunschweig in Germany, and we went to Belgium, the Irish Institute for European Studies, a number of places like that. That sounds a little funny, Irish Institute in Belgium, but that's a long story. At any rate, were you involved in any of those?
Only in
Just
Romania.
in Romania.
See, after I retired, then they sent me to Romania to live. To qualify for something, I forgot what it was, I had to have a permanent person on residence to run the program. So I'm over there, and of course you can't take so much money out of the country. So the guy's going to bring me cash. And one of our guys, Suvi Nazem, had been traveling all over the world doing some other things. He showed up in Iași one day. He had French francs, which he could not convert to their money. And so I had to bail him out and take, here's the money for you. He paid me back and I got back to Omaha.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was interesting. In many of those countries, you couldn't. Banks didn't work the way they work.
Oh, yeah,
here.
working money changed on the street.
And you either changed money on the street or, but you didn't use credit cards.
Did not exist.
Right. And I remember traveling. I was a visiting professor in Tajikistan for a few months, and I had to carry several $1,000s with me in my pocket.
You're a banker all the time.
Yeah, very close to the skin there, in a you know, in a wallet that couldn't be pilfered.
See, one of our faculty, this was Bob Mathis, showed up one day in Bucharest. I met him. We were going to fly out the next day to Iași. So we got to the airport that morning, met by machine gun toting guys. You can't fly up there today. So Bob's ready to come back from Omaha. I said, I've had enough of this. But I said, no, hang around. I got on the telephone, called up to Iași. They said, get on the train, we'll meet the train. So Bob was pretty disgruntled by that time. Then we got to Iași. We were met by all these students and faculty. Had a great big party going on in the Trion Hotel. And now, of course, Bob loves that country. Yeah. But the meeting over there was not great. Thought the guy was going to take the watch off your wrist, on the street. Yeah. But that was a wonderful place to be.
Well, we only have, we're getting, actually, time has been going quickly here because we're down to our last 8 or 9 minutes of the interview. And we haven't, we're up to about the time when you're retired now. In 1992, you had another new dean, that's Mike Carroll. He lasted a few years. I guess I knew him very well, too, because it was during his tenure that I was acting Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, so I worked with him a good deal. Can you talk a little about him?
I didn't know him. I just knew of him.
That's right. You'd retired by him.
I retired. I knew that he was not well liked by many of the faculty.
Yeah.
The staff especially didn't like him. But he didn't last very long either.
But he was a really nice guy, and
I didn't know him.
Worked very easily with him. And then he was followed by
Hilly.
Stan Hilly.
I didn't know Stan Hilly, because by that time they were getting involved in some other things that called me back in on the campus to work on getting ready for the, I forget what it was now, but some celebrations went on. They wanted to get things back together. It might have been the history, the 50-year history or something, because I got involved with Stan Hilly, so I knew him much better. I did not know Carol at all.
Well, Stan, one of the things he did, if I remember again from your history, is revise the executive MBA program quite extensively.
Yes.
Were you involved in that at all?
No.
Or?
See, I was retired.
Yeah. Well, I just thought they might have called on you for advice or something.
No, they had their own advisors.
Okay. And then Stan was replaced, of course, more recently by Louis Pohl. And who you...
I knew Lou Pohl because he was a faculty member
right.
in the marketing department.
And I think from what I hear, he's doing a very good job right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a go-getter. He moved that college along. He was moving anyway.
Yeah.
But he's got it under momentum.
Well, we still have some time left. One thing I'd like to hear your opinions on as we go along here, and this dates way back, but it was certainly during the time when you were an active faculty member, is the development of the MBA program in the college. How extensively were you involved in that?
I was part of it because I had the degree to teach in the master's degree program. Of course, the early days were primarily taught at night.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with students downtown.
Yeah, Milo Bale used to call this the busiest night spot in town.
That's right. Probably true.
Yeah.
They're going on out here all of the time.
Well, that was a big project, developing a graduate program, wasn't it?
Well, it meant, see, the teaching load had to go from 15 hours down to 12.
Right.
And of course, that meant the rest of the university said, hey, you guys can't do that. That cost the university more money to drop other faculty down to 12 hours.
Well, and eventually did. We all...
Well, you had to go down to 12. Then you then you go for master's degree program, graduate programs. You get more credit for that, so it goes down to 9. You still have a growing student body, so you have to have more faculty coming in all the time with reduced workloads because research is becoming more and more important. They want publication. They want things done, which is more just a teaching.
Which enhances the reputation of
right.
the university. That's the reason why.
There was a time they put all the emphasis on teaching. When I came here, that's all they cared about was teaching. Dr. Bale made that
and
very
we
clear.
still emphasize it. We still
yes, but that was,
want good teaching. If we don't have that, we don't have anything, really.
That's right. But you want to do some research, you're kind of on your own. There's real good research writers on the campus on those days. Dr. Worrell, certainly in the English department, did lots of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the emphasis was there. But primarily, until we got the faculty member teaching loads down, you couldn't go for the master's programs.
Well, you know, a corollary to that is if you reduce the number of courses, that's what you mean by teaching load, the number of courses a faculty member teaches, you need more faculty to cover the same.
You also narrow what he teaches.
Yeah.
When I came here, you're a jack of all trades. You got to teach this, teach that, all those different things, like they did in junior colleges.
Mm-hmm.
But now you specialize, you teach 2 or 3 courses, and that's it. You do your research in those areas, that's it.
Well, who teaches the introductory courses then, the beginning courses that are more general?
I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, the senior professor should do that.
Yeah.
You want your top faculty to teach.
I always felt that too.
I taught the introduction to business class for years. You know, the first time Dean Lucas said, Jack, I want you to teach that course. I said, wait a minute. I'm here to teach senior students. He said, Jack, I want you to try for just a semester. So I did. You know, try it. So I did like it. I like those freshman students. And over the years, I developed some special programs where you had using 2 projectors to teach these things.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 or 4 women co-eds who did all the grading of my books for me, and we got along fine. And I think the class were pretty good. So I meet students down there and say, they remember me in that class. They like the class. We taught in this building, up in the auditorium.
This is in the old engineering building,
yeah,
but then what did we call it? The College of Applied Arts building.
Applied Arts. There's There used to be an auditorium up there, maybe not anymore,
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
still there. It's a
Okay.
huge room with that's about 2 stories high.
The first time,
You can't see the students in the back.
side note, Dr. Rod Crane, economics, he taught there, and of course, those they had tables like this, and when you go up that big incline, he looked up, oh, my women in skirts.
Yeah.
So next day, they had these modesty tables, panels on across all the tables.
Funny. Well, Rod Crane was an interesting person, too. He
Oh,
was
yes.
Dr. Bale's assistant for
yes.
a long time.
Oh, yes.
And he was an economist, wasn't
Economist.
he? And did a lot for the university.
He did a lot. He taught the big classes, hundreds of students. He was a great lecturer. He liked the big classes. Some faculty only wanted 2 and 3, maybe 30 students at a time, 20 students. Not Rod Crane. He liked a big audience. He was a good lecturer.
And now one thing I'm trying to remember about him, I think, didn't he have his own municipal fund that he ran him?
I think he did. I'm not too aware
I
of
think
that,
he
but
did.
Yeah.
And so he had that practical side too.
Yes.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. Okay. There are a lot of things we've skipped over quickly here, but we don't really have more than a few 30 seconds left or so. And I'm wondering whether we have time to expand on your international stuff any at all. You mentioned briefly what you did in Romania. Can you spend 20, 30 seconds telling us a little bit more about that?
Well, from Iași, we went over to what's the other country right next door to Romania?
Moldova?
Moldova. Did some teaching over there too. Our students would take our course over there and come back to Iași and continue teaching. But primary lectures to students and to faculty.
Now, you lectured in English?
Yes.
Did you have translators?
They need translators.
Okay,
Those
so
they knew the language.
students knew the language well
Yes, they
enough.
did.
That was a problem for me in Tajikistan because I did need translators for about half the students. Half the students understood in the
Well,
area.
some of my group had to have translations.
Yeah.
Some of the faculty in some of the areas, but most of the time they divided the class so some knew the English, some didn't. So I could teach in English and maybe a translator.
Yeah. Well, that program still goes now.
Oh yes, yes.
Well, Jack, I think we're about at the end of our session here, and I want to thank you very much for spending time with me this morning and with our audience. It's been fun for me to think back about all these times we had. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today in a visit with Professor Emeritus Jack Hill, longtime faculty member in the College of Business Administration. We've been taking a look at some of the history of UN Omaha as seen through the eyes of the people that made that history. This is Jack Newton inviting you to join us again in the series we call Reflections in Time.